What is it like to be the Department of Defense's highest ranking openly transgender official? What was it like serving in the US Navy in the era of don't ask, don't tell? The Honorable Shawn G. Skelly, performing the duties of Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, answers these questions and more. I'm your host, Hadeil Ali. Welcome to Driving Impact.
Driving Impact, an exclusive insight into the personal backgrounds and careers of trailblazers on the front lines of policy.
Ms. Skelly, it's such an honor to host you here at CSIS.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
And when was the last time, remind me, that you were at the center?
I think I was last at the center just about a year ago for a Chatham House Rules discussion on Ukraine.
So such a pleasure to host you here again and have you on Driving Impact. Really looking forward to hearing more about your story and your journey. Ms. Skelly, what did 10-year-old Shawn Skelly want to be?
I know what I wanted to do, and that was to fly something, anything, a plane, a jet, even helicopters. I grew up in Long Island, New York, where there was, back in the 70s, it had been a long-standing aviation industry there. It was really a place of aviation that often isn't thought of now in association with Long Island, where I grew up.
Were there any mentors or friends or people around you that also helped with this spark for passion for aviation?
Very much so. I am sitting here today. I think it's a direct line from the mentors I had. People that I now recognize were mentors. Back then, they were just the husband of my grandmother's best friend and their son. So my mentors were a gentleman who had been a Marine naval aviator in World War II in Southwest Asia. Think of the Guadalcanal campaign and the like, and who won a Distinguished Flying Cross for his service in World War II. Their son, who was just a couple years younger than my own mother, became the first naval aviator to go straight from flight school to fly the now very famous F-14 Tomcat. And he wound up becoming one of the more famous fighter pilots of his time, with an incredible number of hours and carrier landings and the like. And when I was in high school, they became my mentors. And it was all over but the crying from that point on. I wanted to fly off of aircraft carriers, and what they instilled in me, some of the values that they instilled in me, I bring to work every day to this day.
What are some of those values?
It started with the admonition to be a ready room cowboy. The ready room is a place where the aviators brief and wait to go fly. Is whenever you have the opportunity to do the thing that you're doing, then it was fly, go fly. If you're going to be any good at it, you have to actually do it. Seize every opportunity and be hungry for it. And now that's come along to any hard problem, or if I'm asked to do anything, the answer is yes. And then ask what it is I just agreed to and figure out how to tackle that problem.
And that's applicable to any type of work that we're doing or wanting to pursue, right? Being ready. And that's the definition to me of leadership.
It's
right?
Also experience matters, right? Mm-hmm. You can study all you like, but experience in the arena, experience with the task is where the really deep learning comes into play.
So is that what influenced your decision to then pursue a career as a naval flight officer?
It was pretty emotional, and that is the coolest looking thing I can imagine doing. I want to go fly airplanes off of aircraft carriers because most of the airplanes on a Navy aircraft carrier in the 60s, 70s, 80s were made by the Grumman Corporation, the then Grumman Corporation, which was headquartered on Long Island. My classmates in elementary school and high school, their parents built those airplanes. So it was very much a home thing. But then I learned that I was blind as a bat, so I wasn't going to be a pilot. But thankfully, due to the fact that I was, enraptured with naval aviation, we had a lot of naval flight officers, navigators, and weapon systems officers, so I could just take another seat in those same aircraft.
Are you someone who enjoys flying and traveling in general now, or how do you?
Not if I'm not up front.
You don't want to be a passenger in the back?
Without the ability to look out, see all the things, see all the instruments. I still enjoy it. I still, when we go fly, we were just on a trip last week. I was like to look outside where I can get a peek and then go to the, there's always on the app or on the seat back screen how high you are and how fast you're going, and go, I think we're at 3,000 feet right now. I think we're probably maybe based on this altitude about 5 minutes from landing, and then I get to check it because they tell you that on the screen, and that's what I was paid to do. Now it's a bloody computer doing all that work when it used to be me.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that's a difficult switch, right?
Technology is great. The one thing I certainly learned through the course of my career is technology is going to fail you sooner or later, and you better be ready to pick up for it.
Mm-hmm. We can't just count on technology by itself,
no.
Right? Shawn, as you look back at your upbringing, what are some of the values that were instilled in you that you think you still are utilizing on a daily basis as a leader today?
Right. It comes direct from my father. I don't think we ever had an explicit talk about it, but it certainly accumulated over time that the most important thing you are when you're part of a team is a teammate. Mm. You're not always asking for the ball or looking to step up front and grab the microphone, but what does it take to score? What does it take to succeed, to do the thing? It's always team, the team's mission, whether that's win the game or get the work done, and really to call yourself out and say, hey, I need a break, or what about me? I wound up not feeling comfortable with having that, injecting myself into the team. As I've aged, I've realized that's a skill I'm still trying to perfect, as to that self-care that you need, if you want to actually work hard and succeed, you actually have to take care of yourself and look out for yourself. And you can still be a good teammate while doing that. It actually makes you a better teammate because it helps you recognize when other people need a breather, a break, or need a little help in that way. But it really all started with team and mission first.
Team and mission. I always like to make the analogy with sports because I think there's a lot of overlap between leadership and teams, and then also different sports that have the same lessons.
I think I was set up for a life in the military and government by somehow I was drawn towards playing defense. Any place where you could just play defense, or defense was really definable, in hockey, in basketball, in soccer. Put me close. I'm going to stop the thing. I'll be the last line of defense. I don't need to score. You all score. I'm going to make sure they don't score. Mm-hmm. In that way. It's similar to my love of music. I don't really focus on the singer and the lead guitar player. Mm. I really have an affinity for the rhythm guitar player who's doing all the foundational work, as well as like bass players and drummers. They're the ones who are really the rhythm section who drive the thing, while all the cool kids do stuff over the top.
I love that beautiful connection. And now that you've brought up music, we have to talk about rock. So you're a huge fan of rock, if I'm not mistaken, and you always like to go to different concerts. I know you've been to one of my favorite venues in DC, which is 930.
Yes.
And I know you've been there many times, and a lot of other venues in DC. You've shared a little bit about why you loved going to these concerts, but what is that passion for music? Where does it come from, and why do you enjoy taking the time to do that for yourself?
I think over the years, my professional journey really hasn't forced me or given me the opportunity to be a deep expert on something. I have such admiration for people who are true experts, through learning, through experience, through deep study and practice. I really admire that, and I really enjoy working with experts. But I've become an obscene generalist and a process person. And what I see in music is the 10,000 hours to achieve perfection and expertise in something, and to watch those people do things from which are generally lifelong passions for them, to watch them do it so well. And the result is, unfortunately, most of the shows that I want to go see don't even start till 9 or 10 p.m. on a weeknight. So that hurts. But there's reward with it when often I go by myself because of, people are busy, people have families and kids. And I'll find myself in the middle of a crowd of relative strangers. We're all there to see this performance of this band, this artist. And at some point, almost, without fail, I will feel that I'm smiling. I'm listening, I'm enjoying the music. There's somebody I'm always studying their previous performances. There's some artists that I could be accused of stalking because I catch them every time they come to town for over a decade. But at some point I will feel that, there will already have been a 12 or 13 hour day before I make my way to the 9:30 club. But then I'll feel that I'm smiling in the middle of a song. And I'm like, yep, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, that's an objective of mine, to find a way to go to a concert by myself, because I think what you said is important, right? There's something beautiful about going to a concert without knowing anyone in the crowd, but sharing something so profound, right?
Then all of a sudden you find out that the song that you wanted to hear because you knew the lyrics of, they did as well.
That's a great example. I look forward to finding a time where I can do that. Ms. Skelly, you've served on active duty with the Navy for a little over 20 years, starting off as a naval flight officer. Did you expect to serve for that long?
No, not at all. There was never a plan except to go fly off of aircraft carriers. And as a 17-year-old, then I wound up getting a Navy ROTC scholarship. I wound up eventually getting selected for flight school. Got into flight school, managed to graduate, get winged, and get selected for a carrier aircraft, which wasn't guaranteed. And then found myself flying off of aircraft carriers and then pinching myself for the better part of 20 years. So I'm really fortunate, blessed, I'd even say privileged over that time to have been able to take my childhood dream, find my way to it, and then from there, again, I've said it before, there's a direct line from that to where I am today.
I'm sure there are many, many memorable moments throughout your incredible career. Any moment that really sticks with you, or any lessons that you've taken?
One of the first time I had to do something that wasn't in the classroom in flight school was a little simulator. It was essentially a faux aircraft cockpit, but with the instruments. And it was really the introduction to instrument navigation, how you navigate at night, at dark, over long distances. And I failed it. I had gone through high school, got the scholarship, went through college. I never had to try very hard academically. I certainly paid attention, attended class, took notes, thought about it, thought I was studying for tests, got into my first application environment, and I failed it. I didn't hit enough turns on time. I blew through an altitude, missed that we should have leveled off because the instructor was playing the part of a pilot that I was directing, which is a thing a navigator or naval flight officer is taught to do. And I think I missed something in the brief. So those were 3 what we call below averages, which was equal to a failure, or as we call in naval aviation, a down. So I downed a flight. You only get to down 3 flights, and I downed the very first one. A simulator was equivalent to a flight in that regard. I know now, having become an instructor myself later, he was a terrible instructor because he offered no coaching through the way, or there was no debrief and feedback after. But that was an incredible shock to my life experience at that point. How did that happen? And I had the opportunity. I was early in my class, so a lot of other classmates had to do that one before we moved on to successive events. I spent 10 days, 2 weeks searching my soul, searching myself as to what does it mean to prepare? What does it mean to appreciate the challenge that is that one event that lasts with the pre-brief, with the event, and then the debrief after. Maybe it was 2 whole hours. What do I have to do better? And what that started for me on a journey, now still lifelong, is how to understand the things that you need to be preparing for and what preparation looks like when you start to define what success in that moment looks like and how that then contributes to the successive events or successes or challenges that you can associate it with. It changed a lot for me that day, that face-planting comic splat of a failure that was really pretty impactful for the potential of my graduating flight school.
So although in that moment it was a moment of failure, but looking back,
it was a crucible, and it was really an inflection point.
Yeah. You had set out a time to retire, right? After about 20 years or so.
Yeah.
But something happened, and then you stay on a little bit longer. Can you share with us and our audience why you decided to stay?
So we mentioned earlier, I didn't have a plan as for how long I was going to stay. As it turned out to be, I joined to get the opportunity to fly. I flew, and it's like, okay, I still owe some more time. I have to do it again. I left flight school, and I left my initial, my secondary training after flight school, saying I never want to be one of those instructor people. Then 2 years later, looking at the opportunities and having flown and then accumulated over 1,000 hours and a couple hundred carrier landings, the best opportunity to keep racking up that time wasn't as instructor, the thing I swore I wanted no part of. So I did that. And when I did that, I liked learning about leadership in that way. Then the opportunities are stay or go. There was successive stays or goes, which then led me to get the opportunity to get back in the cockpit again. And then I realized, you know what? I think I want to go back to school. Naval War College is available to me. In residence, oh, and by the way, we don't have to go to an outside university now. It's actually fully accredited in degree granting. Double win. And with that came another tour that was required, and then you're on the cusp of being able to reach the then 20-year minimum for a full retirement. And so, but again, I expected to do another tour because I learned I really liked having greater responsibility. I'd been leading teams, been a squadron, not a commander, but a leader in a squadron, junior people. I really liked it. And I was gaining an appetite that I still have to this day for hard things. And so I expected that I would go past the tour that took me to 20, but then I figured out who I was as a person. And again, that was another hard stop, an almost comic shock that challenged everything I thought I knew about myself when I came to understand my identity and as a trans person in that way. And it was almost a science fiction movie type moment where everything slowed down, practically froze, the room went dark, and then it kind of became a spotlight, kind of what we're in, lit environment here, and simultaneously the noise floor of the world. And it actually happened around a room, a reception, a cocktail hour. And I sat down at the edge of this room, and all of a sudden it just stopped. Sound went down. Could hear a pin drop in my mind, and it's like, oh, that's what this all has been. The questioning, confusion over the course of my adult life. It's like, oh, am I transgender? What? And it just stopped. And it's like, I'm actually calm with that. I'm actually comforted by saying those words. What does that mean? What has changed? If that's true, I have no idea what comes next. If that's true, I become fearful for my ability to stay in the Navy. My ability to stay in the Navy is directly tied to my then understanding of how to support my family. Had a barely 4-year-old son. What do I do for a job what happens if I get discovered, all of it within what seemed like seconds? My understanding of my place in the world had changed, and it all went to unknown, went to reasonably understood as to the options that lay before. Like, do I want to maybe try and find my way as to a uniformed professor at one of the war colleges? I like that environment. Or maybe I want to try to take a run at a military job in State Department, or take another try at the Pentagon, because I had actually been approved to go to the Pentagon, but we couldn't find a seat, and they said, go somewhere else. And I wound up being attached to the Marine Corps, which was an incredible opportunity at the end of time. So there I was, a Navy officer, working for a Marine 1-star general in a Marine command, supporting Marines and sailors in combat. And our job was literally to find life-saving solutions for them in combat. And we were achieving quantifiable, measurable success in doing that. And in the middle of that, my personal life just stopped, turned upside down, and I had to figure out what to do from that point forward. And for me, it was, I need to go find some help, somebody to talk through with it. A thing I had never done before, because it could never be about me. And that took a couple of months. The internet in 2006 was still certainly not like it is today. Very few professionals advertise themselves on the web as the way they do now. And resources and how to find your way to people and things wasn't quite so easy. But it took me a couple of months to find someone who might be able to help me with it, who had some experience dealing with it. And then when I sat down and talked to that professional, it really helped me confirm after a period of time, yep, that was right. This is who I am, and what do I do with that? And I realized the thing I had to do is I had to do something constructive. Waiting to the 20-year mark to be able to get out, to have served honorably and have the full benefits, and then take with it my experience. And as many of us who serve in national security know, one of your greatest assets is your security clearance. Like, if I get thrown out, I don't know how I'd get discovered. I don't know why I'd be thrown out specifically, but it would probably be something to do with conduct unbecoming. Would they take my clearance? I don't know. Or would they be vindictive? I don't know. You're a Navy officer with the Marine Corps. What's that going to mean? What's that scandal, semi-scandal, or just not going to be? All unknowns. But once I was able to find a professional who helped me, then I was able to begin to rationalize what was right for me. To this day, I've had the opportunity to stay with that therapist for over a dozen years. And she's in my head forever as the woman who helped me save my life, to help me figure out that I wasn't truly alone, that what I was saying was understandable and relatable, and I could figure it out. And so we figured out how I could be constructive with my situation while being terrifyingly closeted for a couple of years in that way, and begin to make progress and become comfortable. I didn't tell anyone. There were only two people who knew what was up with me, my therapist and then the medical doctor. I then went and accessed, because I had incredible privilege at that time. I was working in the National Capital Region. I was a Navy commander. All things are relative. A relatively senior officer with the ability to make some time while still doing my job. And I had enough money in the bank because I was a Navy officer. We had flight pay, all of that good stuff, where I could take money out of my own pocket to access that care while being in the closet and feeling terrible about hiding everything from my family to that point, which I felt was the safe thing to do. And I was fortunate that that didn't completely ruin our relationship when the time came for the conversation that had to come.
Thank you so much for your openness and vulnerability. You've described this moment or moments of perhaps fear, but at the same time, moment of clarity. And this all happened in the context of the don't ask, don't tell policy. Yeah. Could you tell our audience briefly what that policy is and how it impacted your experience?
I never thought about don't ask, don't tell, except one time while I was serving under it, even though I didn't realize it might apply to me. I'm not even sure that it did apply to me in that case, because it was about gay and lesbian service members. And it was really, the best word that comes to mind, it was perverse. Yes, you can be gay and lesbian and serve, just don't, ask, the government can't ask you if you're gay and lesbian, and you can't tell anyone or do anything that would, by that action or display, tell someone or give them the indication that you were gay and lesbian. It's logically, I don't know how you square the logic on that, but it was a compromise, as I understand it. The Clinton administration wanted to go all the way, couldn't get it done. As we know now, we've always known the people that we understand and describe and bundle as LGBTQ plus people have always been a part of humanity. As long as you've had any kind of a military or any kind of organization, they've been in them. As I like to kind of have fun, in a little conspiratorial sense, we're everywhere, right? We are. We have been. We still will be. But it was at that time, I just knew, and I didn't directly associate it to don't ask, don't tell, but it was like, oh, I can't stay any longer and be me. I can't stay in and pursue me. I did think they might call me gay, that trans would be equivalent to gay, and whatever the shorthand was. Part of my job today involves dealing with the still lingering consequences of don't ask, don't tell, and people who served under it and were discharged under it. It boiled down to, you can't stay. The longer you stay, the more you're at risk of your service and your, what I considered my maximum economic potential, immediately at least, coming out of service, was tied to getting out cleanly. It felt horrible. That felt wrong. So I have a real sympathy for the folks who served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell explicitly, and folks who were affected by it. I had my version of it. It wasn't exactly the same as theirs, but I certainly know what the feeling was like.
Yeah. As you're talking about this, Ms. Skelly, I'm thinking about the importance of representation. Why does it matter to have someone from a similar background, similar identity, similar lived experience in senior positions within the broader national security space? And in 2013, you joined the Obama administration as the first transgender veteran to serve as a presidential appointee. How do you feel about this idea of firsts, right? Is it, because, I've talked to people, sometimes people are, it's great, but other folks don't want to be called first or feel like it's disappointing to have to be the first, right? So recently.
I didn't realize I was the first transgender. Well, it wasn't been hard to do the math because I am the fourth ever openly trans person to be appointed by a president. And that was probably the motivating reason behind me getting appointed at all is the administration did the first three in relatively short, close order to one another, and then there hadn't been any more for a while. And then the second term was approaching, and advocacy organizations were, no, we were serious. You're going to keep doing this, right? There are trans people who can do the business of government. Mm-hmm. There were trans people doing the business, people on the Hill, people out there in advocacy, nonprofit, the wider space. Get some in the administration look like your country. And so they went looking for more. And I stumbled onto their radar and got hired. But I got hired based on the experience of my accumulated military and private sector experience. So I was number 4. And then as the administration then decided, and then Defense Secretary Carter started the exploration of and implemented the policy for open transgender service in 2016. And then that me being the veteran kind of came into play as well. But the fact that I left service because of the fact I'm trans, I always like to take care to disassociate myself from the folks who were affected and tried to take advantage of those policies before they were so abruptly undone. And the ones who are serving now, a different experience from mine. I often I think that they may be more courageous than I have ever been because of going through that personal experience in front of the world, in front of your unit, in front of your service that way, while still wanting to serve and do the job that you could do because you want to do the job. That identity and being, it's modeling. People have a better idea to understand that something's possible for them when they think they see it. If not exactly it, they say, but if she or he can do something like that, maybe I can do the thing that I want to do because it resonates for me. Or I just want to do that job. And if someone like me can do that job, I can do that job too. It's really important. But it's also representative of the fact that talent doesn't know demographic. Talent may be affected by your socioeconomic demographic, your ability to be well and your ability to find the education and develop opportunities can unfortunately be different due to your demographic. But the actual talent and the passion to serve your country and to try and do hard things resides in every slice of humanity, especially in America, which is probably the most representative chunk of humanity as it is. So whenever we think that the wrapping is determinative, you're a suboptimal leader and you're a suboptimal organization by definition. People are due, in your organization should deserve that anybody who legitimately wants to try to be a part of your organization and do those things gets the fair chance to do so. It's about ability. It's about standards. It shouldn't be purely about identity. We can get into, is your hair too long? We've got ponytails now in the military, right? And the world didn't end.
I mean, I would even argue, right, that our institutions or our federal government hurts when we are not recruiting from the diversity that is represented in the United States.
I had the opportunity, thanks to President Obama, the third time he appointed me to serve on the National Commission on Military and National Public Service. And our charge was to go around America, talk to experts, but also talk to the American people about what it meant broadly, what it meant to serve America and the ways that were available to people. One of the hardest challenges is not identity, and it's about our demographics and our generational appreciation of what right looks like and what fairness looks like. And people who are in the younger millennial generation, as well as Gen Z, the world's going to be run by millennials and Gen Z within a minute.
We need to be ready.
Yes, and I'm quite confident that you are, because you're as smart and as driven and as motivated as anybody else is. Yeah, you listen to weirder music. Yeah, you're on the video games or whatever.
The TikTok.
I can't be on the TikTok. That's the one.
The Gen Zers.
Yes, yeah.
They're definitely on TikTok.
But if you look for the qualities that matter, they're there. Mm-hmm. Don't get distracted by the fashion or the music. Don't. Or the food. Don't look for what matters, and it lies there. And if you can't recognize that, suboptimal. To be kind.
Ms. Skelly, you were confirmed and sworn in as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness in 2021, making you the Department of Defense highest ranking openly transgender official and second to hold an office that requires Senate confirmation. If you had to explain very briefly to an audience that's never heard Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness, never heard this title before, how would you explain the role?
The job description is one sentence and then 8 pages of responsibilities, essentially. And that job description is principal advisor to the Secretary of Defense and the Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness for all matters related to the readiness of the total force. DoD's total force means the active duty military, the reserves, the National Guard, our career civilians, and the contractors, full-time equivalent people who do jobs for us inside our offices and our facilities. Those are 3.4 million people. And we have about a $850 billion budget a year, where we're supposed to achieve the National Defense Strategy and the aims of the President and the Secretary of Defense to deter attack and protect the American people. And the question is, are we ready to do that today, which is often conflated to fight tonight? And are we ready to do that over the longer term? And that my job there was to use analytic tools to determine if we're ready tonight and if we're ready for tomorrow. Also, how we educate and train that force, how we create that force that's able to do the mission, as well as how do we protect that force in the sense of safety and occupational health, because we do a lot of dangerous things, but we also do a lot of workaday things too, which is flying airplanes and sailing ships and submarines and operating vehicles, over tanks and armored vehicles and things. But we also have people who drive regular vehicles. We have we have facilities. If there's something in human technology or human endeavor, the DoD probably has at least one of it someplace, to include medicine and science and hard science. So we have all of that. How do we make sure that that is working and safe and creating a force that's capable to do the mission it's been assigned? That's it.
That's very succinct and digestible. Because when I looked at the title and the description, it becomes very
arcane,
complex to understand.
Yeah.
But I think you put it very well. So we talked about Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness, but if I were to go on the website, I see another title, performing the duties of the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. How is that different?
So different. In my what I used to call my day job, the one I was confirmed for, Assistant Secretary for Readiness, when I would travel and meet people, my stand-up routine would start with, I'm the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Readiness. I am the readiness in personnel and readiness, the R in P and R. I am not 50% of my boss's portfolio. The people side is actually several other assistant secretaries and directors of functions. So that was me for 2 years. I was just the happy readiness person with the people leaders around the table with my boss every week, once a week for about an hour, sit there and tell the boss what we're all up to. And some of my work involved my peers, my colleagues in our organization because there's no readiness without people, and people are there to actually achieve the readiness. And so dealt with the people who did manpower and policy. I dealt with the people who do health affairs. I dealt with the people who do the human resources functions. I deal with the people who do what we call resiliency, suicide, sexual harassment, sexual assault prevention, diversity, equity, inclusion. Those are all the personnel side of things. So I saw them once a week, and I interact with them on a regular basis. I had no idea what they were really up to, as I learned when I had to move up to be number 2 over that entire endeavor. I had a passing understanding of the big rocks, as we say, that they were working on, the mine shafts of detail and complexity that they all involved, and the things that I had never seen before was surprising. I was really like, wait, I've been in this business for a long time, and I consider myself sort of an organizational nerd, sometimes a little bit of a bureaucratic Jedi in terms of like, here's how we're going to get that done, because there's that meeting 2 months from now, and we're going to fix our little red wagon between now and then, and we're going to get done what needs to get done. But even within my own organization, where I was actually the senior subordinate by time and by rank, I didn't know what was going on. So I've been playing catch up for the past 2.5 months on all that stuff. I have experience in all those things because I was a unit of measured readiness and a member with a family in the Department of Defense, and I have interagency experience and all like. But in terms of the depth of the stuff, my mind still boggles sometimes at the complexity that we have.
Always something to learn every day, right? Ms. Skelly, as you know, we like to ask our guests to bring a memento that symbolizes a memorable moment in their career. Could you please describe to our listeners what you brought in here today and why you decided to share this with us?
So thank you. I'm grateful for the ask. So find a memento and think about it. So this is a garden variety home fire extinguisher. There's one very much like it under my kitchen sink, right? This one was a farewell gift from my team when I was the director of the Office of the Executive Secretariat at the Department of Transportation. There I worked directly for then Secretary Anthony Fox, Secretary of Transportation, in his front office team. Essentially, in shorthand, as most people know, I was the executive secretary of transportation. We did all the secretary's correspondence with the White House, with the Congress, with the world. Anything that he had to sign in official capacity, we brought together, made right, and put in front of him. A thrilling experience, and I did it coming over from DOD, and I showed up at the back half of the final year of a 2-term administration. And I was hired because they didn't have a director for a period of time. They knew they needed one, wanted one, because an executive secretary is a busy, busy organization in the final year of an administration. And I really had concerns when I showed up to that team. I'm a career military person, DOD person. I got myself around to being excited for the work, but then I realized, wait, are they going to understand a word or a motivation that comes out of me? Because I had always been in the world of defense. Even in the corporate world, they were defense-oriented companies. But how's this going to go? None of them are former military. A lot of people in DOD are former military, have worked there for years and decades. How's this going to go? Once I finally showed up in that first day, and probably by the end of the second day, it's like, these are the exact same motivated professionals serving their country that I had ever known. They loved doing what they do. They loved correspondence. That was new to me, people loving paperwork. But getting it right, because they knew that the secretary only had so much time, which was exactly the place I came from, which was senior leader decision support. Them being actually assigned a thing that's legally valid and implementable, that's decision support too. And that they enjoyed someone come along who wanted to lead them as a team. And so what the fire extinguisher represents was the office had long had a motto, which was the executive secretariat puts out the fires before the secretary ever smells smoke. Because oftentimes things come up, they need it tomorrow, and it's a hot mess. Like, you miss somebody who should have read this 2 weeks, a month ago to sign off on it. And if they have a problem, we have a problem, because it won't be fast to fix. Or there's so many typos in this thing, I'm stopping right now. How did this many typos get to my desk, let alone through my editors? and we have to go back. All those things. Well, meanwhile, the clock is ticking. He needs to sign it so he can present it to Senator whoever, or tell them the bus stop is coming. So they almost wrecked me when they gave that to me, because it harkens back to a unique gift when I was flying in squadrons that we gave our squadron commander His prize pickup truck that he bought got hit, and he was heartbroken. It took months for it to get fixed, and it got hit again, and he was devastated. And then he was soon ready to leave. So we went to a junkyard on the border with Mexico and Tijuana and found a Toyota truck tailgate, and all 30 of us signed this big tailgate and gave it to him, and he about lost it too. So I felt the echo of that truck tailgate come back, this time in a portable fashion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point about the fact that there's no organization without the people, right? And the culture that also you're creating, right? How do your people feel like coming in every day, right? How do you make them feel, and the culture that you create? And Ms. Skelly, you said earlier something that really resonated with me. There's no readiness without people, and I think that makes me think about, if we're talking about military readiness, then who gets to be part of the military, right? And during the Trump administration, you were quite outspoken, and you were an advocate against Trump's transgender military ban. Why is it so important to make sure that we include and accept transgender troops?
I immediately take it. It's the discussion we had a little earlier about where talent lies. Talent lies everywhere. And when you decide that one kind, and they're not kind of people, they're just people. We're all human beings. All the other distinctions after that are ones we decide to apply, frankly. But it's representative of the fact that you say, because of who you are, you're incapable and you're dangerous and you're unworthy. You know who else had that applied to them? Black Americans.
Absolutely.
Women. Specifically for a short period of time, Japanese Americans. They were interned. They finally decided to allow some of them. They begged to serve in World War II, and when they were allowed to, they became some of the most decorated units in the Army and some of the most intense combat anybody saw in World War II. Gay and lesbian people, right? Oh, don't ask, don't tell. They're already there. But if they're actually out, everything's going to fall apart. Good order and discipline, small unit cohesion, all of those things. You can't integrate the force, all of that. You can't, okay, we let women in and they can wear the uniform and they're not part of a corps or something like that. But fly airplanes, that took till the 80s, early 80s. Fly combat-coded airplanes, actually fly all the airplanes for all the reasons. Each time there was a prophecy of that America's military would fail, America would be invaded, or whatever, the world would end. Wrong, 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 wrong. Transgender people are no different. They were already high performing, or else they'd be on the street. That's one of the things about the military. We don't hang on to people very long who can't cut it or are negatives to their organizations.
Cut throat.
So if they're still with you and they're willing to go through this to stay with you, what's your problem? And also, part of it was, it's the cost, it's this, all of which were conflated, inflated, misconstrued, to be kind, and we're wrong, right? Yeah. There's the cost of the care required to take care of those people and treat them with dignity and allow them to continue their service is less annually than the cost of just one drug. And you can look that up, you can find out which one it is, but it's an erectile dysfunction drug.
Data matters. I did not know that. I very much enjoyed reading your article, Transphobia and National Security, and I want to read to you a line in your article. It is not the presence of transgender service members which threatens military readiness. It is policy's very discrimination against them. How do you deal with people that say this whole woke agenda, when we've heard that about a lot of different topics, right? Including diversity, equity, inclusion. It's causing significant harm to our military readiness. How do you answer that?
I first answer it with answering a question with a question. Could you please define wokeism for me? What does that look like? Don't give me hand wavy.
I'm sure you haven't gotten a great response, have you?
I haven't been given the courtesy of being actually posed that question, which I believe says something. I know I've personally been the subject of conversations at that point by people who have had the courtesy to talk to me about whether or not they think I can do my job. But they haven't bothered to describe it in the ways that we describe all the things we do, focusing on the Department of Defense. So which specific aspect of the performance of the mission of the Department of Defense do you want to apply that to and show me how it's less than, high performing or performing differently because of that? I haven't seen those things come up. Often it's attributed to the challenges with recruitment and retention. I take that to mean that they haven't been paying attention to the long gestating challenge with recruitment and retention that we are working extraordinarily hard on, in which my boss and I have the lead for the Secretary of Defense on within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. This is a generational challenge that America has in a modern world, in a world that changed in response to the ending of the Cold War, that this start of the war on terror, the post 9/11 world, a lot of economic and societal factors that all come together. Since we became an all-volunteer force, we just hit we're in the 50th anniversary year of the ending of ending of conscription and the start of the all-volunteer force. All of those things have come together while successive generations of Americans have come out in a very different economy, different approaches to education, social issues, and that's what puts us, I believe, those macro factors coming together have put us in the place that we're in. Not that all of a sudden somebody invented a new term of art to define seeing people as individuals and respecting them for who they are. That's an easy out where you're looking to gain some kind of short-term advantage as opposed to dealing with the real issues at play.
How do you deal with these personal attacks on your identity and career? And I know there have been several, including a recent one in just a couple months ago. How do you deal with that?
There were two parts to that episode on the floor of the House. One dealt with an amendment under what's called the Holman Rule, which was authorized by this current Congress. I looked at that, which was to take my pay down to $1 a year because I'm really bad at my job. I challenged them to tell me what my job is and how I do it. Again, the courtesy of a conversation. Call me to a hearing table. I would love to be there. That's my job. It is our government's. It's our form of government and our responsibility as a senior government official to testify and to talk about how I do what I do on behalf of the Secretary and the President. Didn't get that courtesy. But it's a legitimate rule of Congress. Folks can think whether or not it's a good one, whether or not it would have passed. It didn't pass in my case. It wasn't added as an amendment to the 2024 National Defense Authorization Act. But the other part was a personal attack on me, my humanity, how my identity may or may not inform my ability to do my job. In all frankness, the very morning I got the very first email asking me if I'd be interested in having a conversation with the White House about being considered for the nomination for the position I have now. That was a quick beat away going, what is that job? Quick Google on the phone. And then, something very much like what happened on the floor of the House, I signed up for in that first minute, honestly. We talked about the burden or the responsibilities of being a first. Number two, but in that first wave of presidentially appointed Senate confirmed person, based on the cultural environment we've been in for a few years now, I've expected it for 2.5 years. Frankly, surprised it took this long. I'd rather it not happen. But at the same time, I'm not going away. The way I go away is if the president asks me to, or they go through the full congressional process to remove me. First, people who go through the door first, whether they recognize it or accept it or not, your actions, your performance will inform how high that bar or barrier is for the people that can and should come behind you.
I want to make sure to mention to our audience, Out in National Security, an organization that you co-founded, and the importance of representation that we talked about, mentorship as well, and seeing people that look like you, that you can relate to from similar backgrounds. And I know there's been incredible events and programming, and our program at CSIS has partnered with Out in National Security for some engagement as well. So want to thank you also for taking the time to put together such an important organization, not just for the LGBT community, but for the broader national security space as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Skelly, to close, unfortunately, we're running out of time. We like to ask our guests 3 questions every episode of Driving Impact Rapid Fire. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. What are 3 words you would use to describe your career?
Inconceivable, humbling, exhilarating.
In your opinion, what does it mean to be American?
To be part of something bigger than myself that just about anybody in the world can join if their heart and their mind is in the right place.
And what is giving you hope right now?
Young people, Gen Z. I got the opportunity to visit a pretty classified Department of Defense facility earlier this year, and doing the business there was a young woman in the Air Force, an enlisted Air Force member, had just turned 20 a couple months before. We had taught her, and she had learned a very important foreign language for us, and she was engaged simultaneously. She was bringing the language. Another young person, not quite as young, was bringing the cyber expertise, and with them was another law enforcement-enabled person, and they were a team that were combating state-sponsored international criminal organizations who were trying to mess with the American economy. And she was doing it live in real time, and she wasn't even 21 yet. And I looked at her, and we talked for about a minute. I'm like, I think I'm going to be working for you before very long. And she's Gen Z. We're in good hands if we can just get out of their way.
Definitely. And that's a consistent theme that we've seen with our guests, mentioning Gen Zers and younger millennials are as the future. Ms. Skelly, it's been such an honor to have such a wonderful conversation with you today. Thank you for taking the time to share with us your story. Thank you for your openness, vulnerability, your service, and leadership to our country.
It's been a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining our conversation with the Honorable Shawn Skelly on how she became the highest-ranking openly trans official at the Department of Defense. Do you want to hear more exclusive stories from policy leaders? Be sure to follow Driving Impact on YouTube, Spotify, or CSIS.org.